I had already ironed the good tablecloth, the blue one with the little embroidered daisies, before I looked at the calendar and realized it was still Tuesday. Nobody was coming on Tuesday. I stood there in my kitchen with the iron still warm in my hand, and I laughed a little, the way you laugh when something isn't really funny at all. Because I hadn't planned to iron that tablecloth. My hands had just done it. The way they used to on Sunday mornings, back when there were footsteps on my porch before noon and the smell of coffee wasn't the only thing filling this house. I folded the tablecloth back up and put it in the drawer, and I sat down at my own kitchen table, alone, and I thought, when did I start doing things like this without even deciding to? That was the morning I understood something about myself that I hadn't wanted to see. For almost 2 years, ever since Robert passed, I had been quietly organizing my whole life around a phone that rarely rang and a driveway that mostly stayed empty. I never said a word about it. Not to my daughter Claire, not to my son Michael, not even to my sister Dot. I told myself I understood. They had jobs. They had children of their own now, soccer games and school projects and 100 small emergencies that needed them more than I did. But understanding something in your head is different from feeling it stop hurting in your chest. Sunday lunches were the hardest. For 31 years, this house had smelled like roast chicken on Sundays. Now I still cooked it sometimes, out of habit, and I would set out 4 plates before I remembered, halfway through, that it was only going to be me. I'd stand at the counter holding that 4th plate, and something in me would just go quiet. The porch was almost worse, in its own gentle way. Robert and I used to sit out there every evening with our coffee, watching the Hendersons' dog chase nothing in particular down the street. After he was gone, I kept sitting out there alone, and I noticed how the second chair, his chair, had started to fade a little more than mine from the sun. Nobody was sitting in it long enough to keep the color from that side. Then there was the mailbox. I want to tell you about the mailbox, because it embarrasses me a little, even now. I had started walking out to check it twice a day. Once in the morning, and again around 4, just in case something had come in the afternoon delivery. A card. A letter. Anything with my name on it in someone's handwriting. Most days there was nothing but coupons and a bill. But I kept walking out there anyway, in my slippers, rain or shine, like I was waiting for proof that somebody out there was thinking of me. It was at the grocery store, of all places, where something in me finally cracked open. I was standing in the checkout line, and the young woman ringing me up, a girl named Priya, glanced at my card and said, kindly enough, just cooking for one tonight? And I said, yes, just me, in a voice that came out smaller than I meant it to. She smiled and said, my grandmother lives alone too. I call her every single day, but she says the hardest part isn't missing us. It's forgetting she's allowed to still enjoy things without us there. I don't know why those words hit me the way they did. I drove home with my groceries in the back seat and cried a little in my own driveway before I even went inside. Not because I was sad, exactly. Because somebody had said out loud a thing I hadn't let myself think. I had stopped living. I was only waiting. I'd love to know something, if you don't mind me asking. Have you ever caught yourself waiting for a phone call that never came, or setting a table for people who weren't coming that day? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and I promise you, you are not alone in this. Now, back to the story. The following week, I saw a small notice on the bulletin board at church, right by the coffee station where Frank Whitaker always burns the decaf. It was for volunteers at the community center library, just 2 afternoons a week, helping shelve books and read to children after school. I almost walked past it. Then I almost talked myself out of it in the parking lot. But something about Priya's grandmother stayed in my mind, so I went home and I called the number. That's how I met Dolores. Dolores ran the volunteer program, and she was somewhere in her 70s herself, with silver hair pinned up messily and a laugh that seemed too big for such a small woman. On my first day, she handed me a cart of picture books and said, don't worry about doing it perfectly. Just do it. That's the whole secret to starting anything again. I read to 7 children that first afternoon. A little boy named Caleb fell asleep against my arm during the second story, and I sat very still so I wouldn't wake him, and I realized I hadn't felt a small warm body lean against me like that since my own grandchildren were little. Something in my chest that had been clenched for 2 years loosened, just slightly. I kept going back. Tuesdays and Thursdays became mine again, but in a new way. Dolores and I started getting coffee afterward, and she told me about her husband, gone 11 years now, and how she used to sit by her phone too, until one day she didn't anymore. It's not that I stopped loving my children, she told me one afternoon, stirring sugar into her cup. I just stopped putting my whole life in a drawer, waiting for them to open it. I started calling Claire first, instead of waiting for her to call me. Not to make her feel guilty. Just a quick, easy call, to tell her about Caleb falling asleep on my arm, or the tomatoes finally coming in on my back porch, where I'd started a little garden that spring. Sometimes she called back that same week, just to talk. Sometimes she didn't. But I noticed I didn't sit by the phone anymore, holding my breath, waiting for it to decide whether my day would be good or not. Michael visited on a Wednesday, completely unplanned, and found me out back with dirt under my fingernails, laughing with Dolores over the fence about something silly. He stood there for a second, just watching me, before he said, "You seem different, Mom." Good different. I told him I was still the same mother who loved him exactly as much as I always had. I had just stopped waiting for him to prove it. These days, my mornings look different. I still make 2 cups of coffee out of habit, some mornings, and I've made peace with that. But now I usually end up carrying the second one over the fence to Dolores, or out to whichever neighbor is sitting on their porch that day. The blue tablecloth with the daisies comes out for Sunday lunch now, whether anyone else is coming or not, because I decided I'm still worth a nice table. My porch chairs still don't match in color. Robert's side is still a little more sun-faded than mine. I never got around to switching them, and now I think I never will. Some things are allowed to stay exactly as they were. But I don't check the mailbox twice a day anymore. Once is enough. And most afternoons now, you'll find me at that library instead, reading stories to children who lean against my arm and fall asleep before the ending, the same way my own grandchildren once did. I still love my children with everything I have. That part never changed and never will. But I learned, a little late in life, that loving someone deeply and living fully are not opposites. They can sit together at the same table, on the same porch, in the very same heart. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't waiting forever. It's living fully, while keeping the door open. Thank you for sitting with me today. I'll see you next week.